Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Asuma Kataukap. The United States and Iran have concluded the high-stakes nuclear talks in Muscat, Oman, a delicate diplomatic effort designed to address years of mistrust, sanctions, and security concerns. Both sides have agreed to meet, but sharp differences remain over the agenda. Washington wants the talks to address not just Iran's nuclear program, but also its ballistic missiles support for proxies and human rights issues Iran is resistant to discuss. Iran, for its part, has called for the discussions to remain focused solely on its nuclear program and has made the Oman venue a condition for participating, a stance that reflects deep skepticism of U.S. demands. This friction, whether to limit the talks to nuclear issues or to expand them to military and regional questions, is a central obstacle. Iran has said its ballistic missile program is a red line in any negotiation. The United States' push for Iran to denuclearize is not new. It dates back to decades, long before the 2015 agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. Under that deal, Iran accepted limits on uranium enrichment and allowed more robust international inspections in return for sanctions relief. But in 2018, President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the JCPOA and imposed new maximum pressure sanctions. These included broad restrictions on Iran's oil exports, financial sector, and companies dealing with Iran, effectively cutting Tehran off from global financial markets. That move not only scaled back the 2015 deal, but also pushed Iran to resume enriching uranium at higher levels, a further source of tension that has complicated diplomacy ever since. When President Joe Biden took office, his administration attempted to roll back some of these sanctions and seek a return to the JCPOA framework, but with conditions. Sanctions relief would be linked to Iran's compliance with demands to stop enrichment and reimpose rigorous monitoring. Iran has pushed back against what it calls excessive U.S. demands, particularly efforts to link nuclear limits to military and regional issues. This push and the pull has kept diplomacy on a tightrope. Coming back to the present, as U.S.-Iran nuclear talks take place in Oman, the U.S. Embassy has issued a security advisory warnings Americans to exercise caution, limit travel, and avoid large gatherings and protests in the region. Officials say heightened tensions and military presence, including U.S. forces in the Middle East, could pose risks during negotiations. Regional players are watching closely to a failure to reach an agreement could trigger further instability, not just in the Gulf, but across global energy markets. At the same time, diplomacy remains the preferred path for the U.S., as President Trump has stated that diplomacy is for his first choice, even as he leaves military options on the table. Bottom line, these Oman talks are more than a diplomatic formality. They are a crucial test of whether the United States and Iran can find a way out of a years-long stalemate, one rooted in decades of sanctions, broken agreements, and deep strategic fear. Can diplomacy prevail, or will differences over missiles, sanctions, and regional influence derail negotiations once again? The outcome will reshape not just Iran-US relations, but the future of Middle East stability. Now for this, we welcome Mr. Borzo Daragahi. He's an Iranian-American journalist, joins us live from Turkey. Thank you very much, Mr. Daragahi, for joining us. Good to have you.
It's a pleasure. I'm actually in Paris this week.
Oh, okay. I'll ask my team to.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, you're in Paris. Got it. Now, going to our questions. So, in the Oman talks, Iran insists discussions focus solely on its nuclear program, while the U.S. seeks to expand the agenda to include ballistic missiles, regional proxies, and human rights. How realistic is it to bridge this strategic divide, and what mechanisms could help resolve this core friction?
I don't think it is reasonable to resolve this. There is this proposed framework that Al Jazeera reported on, a proposal developed by the Qataris, Turks, and Egyptians that would put a commitment on Iran not to use its missiles in any kind of first strike capacity. And another part of the agreement is to suspend temporarily enrichment of uranium for 3 years. That is until Trump is no longer in office, so he won't have to deal with it, as well as other little security guarantees. Look, the U.S. isn't exactly sure what it wants. It backed itself into a corner. It is under tremendous pressure by certain elements in Washington and Israel. We have to mention Israel because it has been the driving force of this. It is very close to the Trump administration. They want a regime change war. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's own military planners, people in the Pentagon and the State Department, are telling the White House, look, there's no easy way to do what Israel wants. A regime change war isn't going to come about with a few airstrikes. It's not going to come from a week of airstrikes. It's not going to come from a month of airstrikes. You have to put troops on the ground. There's unpredictability. Iran could do this. Iran could close off the Gulf. It can do things we never even anticipated. It's famous for asymmetrical, unpredictable warfare. And so, the Trump administration, as I pointed out, has put itself into this corner, and now it has to try to save face or launch a devastating, unpredictable war.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And now in 2026, what concrete snapback or guarantee mechanisms could the U.S. possibly offer that would convince Tehran to dismantle infrastructure again, especially given the history of American domestic policy shifts?
I mean, there's a lot it could do. It could, for example, just remove secondary sanctions. So, for example, the Trump administration could stop punishing India, let's say, for buying Iranian oil and gas. And as it does now, it can allow the European, even as the U.S. doesn't want to do business with Iran, fine. Iran would say, let us do business with the Europeans. Don't punish European companies or banks for allowing us to for doing business with us. Allow us back onto the SWIFT international banking system to make it easier to move money around, so they don't have to use like Bitcoin to move cash from Iran outside of the country to purchase medicine and essential goods like that, or automotive parts. So, there's a lot that the U.S. could do. The U.S. has so many sanctions on the Iranian regime. They range from, sanctions on individuals to sanctions on financial and banking transactions, dollar access, which has been a key point that brought Iran to the brink of economic collapse and sparked the protests in December 28th, which began this whole crisis. So there's a lot that the U.S. could do, even without the painstaking process of going to Congress and trying to unravel years and years of sanctions that are built into the law.
And how are regional players and allies of U.S., such as Israel, Gulf nations, and Europe, influencing this negotiating stance of the U.S. in Oman, especially given their security concerns and past frustrations over Iran's nuclear activities?
Well, each one is different. Israel is, just rooting for war. They're putting tremendous pressure on the White House to launch a regime change war. And this is being noticed in the U.S. with a lot of critics saying, hey, you want our sons and daughters to go to Iran and fight your war? No way. And so there's, the two pillars of Trump's MAGA coalition, the neocon pro-Israeli types and the America First, more kind of hardcore right-wing types. They're at war over this issue. You can hear it in podcasts and so on. The Gulf and Turkey, the regional countries, I think including like India and Pakistan, they don't want another war. They have traditionally solid and historic ancient ties to Iran. They don't want to see this country destroyed in a war. They don't want to see another Middle East country plunged into chaos, creating a huge refugee crisis. and who knows what else, and breeding more radicalism around the region. So they're trying to get this war not to happen. Meanwhile, the Europeans, I think that they've bowed out of this one. They pretend they haven't. The Europeans are willing to trade support or even tacit support for a U.S. war against Iran. Let U.S. do whatever it wants in Iran, as long as the U.S. keeps the money coming for the war in Ukraine. That is their priority. They're more than willing to sacrifice what they probably consider a wrong-headed U.S. policy on Iran in exchange for support for Ukraine.
Thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, Mr. Daragahi, the U.S. Embassy's recent Leave Now advisory issued just hours before the Muscat talks began. Is this a jarring contrast to the diplomatic opening? Does this signal that U.S. intelligence anticipated a breakdown in negotiations that could trigger a kinetic response from regional proxies, or is this advisory primarily a safeguard against the fallout from the recent domestic protest crackdowns in Tehran, which the U.S. is now officially linking to the nuclear agenda?
Oh, I think it's the latter. I'm an American citizen, and I live in Istanbul, and I'm constantly getting these emails from the consulate saying that there's this whenever there is some kind of crisis, this is just the U.S. State Department covering its rear end, so to speak, in case there is some kind of crisis. An American can't, and Americans are famous for suing, can't sue the State Department and say, you should have warned us that there was trouble coming and it didn't come. I don't put too much stock into this warning.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Daragahi for joining us. Thank you very much and sharing that insight.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on this edition of Deep Dive. We'll continue to follow the story and bring you all the latest developments. Stay tuned to NewsX World for analysis.